This is the show dedicated to raising up the next generation of men of faith and character. My name is Mark Stanifer. Welcome to the Next Men Up. Hey guys, welcome to the show today. The show dedicated to helping boys become healthy and godly men. Because when that happens, everyone benefits. My name is Mark Stanifer, and today we're going to get into the talk. No, not that talk, the other talk, the race talk. My guest today is Rich Johnson. Rich is a husband, father of four, pastor, a yoga instructor, and someone I've come to respect and admire. And he's also a black man, which makes him uniquely qualified to talk about race, both as a man and also as a father guiding his kids through society today. In today's episode, we spend time understanding and defining some of the many terms we are hearing and reading about on a daily basis. And we talk about the influence that Miami Vice and high school sports had on him growing up, and how becoming a man for him and his boys necessarily involves the color of their skin. When it comes to race and racism and injustice, I am on a journey of learning and unlearning, growing and getting better. And today I invite you to join me wherever you are and let Rich be your guide over the next 2 episodes. He is engaging, humorous, transparent, and inspiring. I know you're going to be captivated by his story and challenged by the way he eloquently, yet candidly, navigates through this topic. It is my privilege to share this with you. So let's get to it. Here's the first half of my conversation with Rich Johnson. Well, Rich, what an honor and a privilege to have you on our show today. Thanks for being willing to do this and for gracing us with your presence.
Yeah, so good to be with you, Mark, and all your listeners. Hello, thank you for having me.
This is going to be good, and I have to tell you, we have not really addressed this topic that we're going to get into today. Mm-hmm. And I come into it with a little bit of trepidation, because I haven't walked in the same shoes as you. And even though you and I have more in common as humans and as brothers and as men, we have different lenses and we've had different experiences. And so I just appreciate your willingness to bring that wisdom, to bring that experience, to open up and share your story for our benefit, for our learning, for our growth, and hopefully this will be a way to continue to bring together rather than to divide.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a lived experience. You know, for me, I'm 43 years old, and so I've been in this body, as far as I know, for 43 years. And one of the greatest gifts that I have are my children, 3 boys and a girl, and the intentionality to raise them in this world, to engage it. Is my greatest honor, really. Yeah, that and being a husband to my lovely wife, who gave me the children. So.
Right. Truth be told, she probably did most of the work, right?
At
least in the birthing process.
At least
anyway.
In the delivery process, yeah. But she's beautiful. Our oldest is 15, and then 14, 11, soon to be 12, and then 10.
Okay.
So we had the girl picked out first, at least the name anyway. My thought was, if I have a girl first, she's going to be able to take care of whoever comes behind her. Mm-hmm. And we had a boy first. And
wait, it didn't work out the way
work out the way I planned. Nope. And then we had a second boy. And then we're like, okay, let's slow down here, because they are just 12 months apart, almost to the day. And then the third one, we were like, okay, we're ready for that third one. And we didn't find out what we were going to have, like the previous 2 children we did, we found out. And we were so convinced that it was a girl that we didn't even have any boy names picked out. So get to the delivery room, comes out, honey, you're not going to believe this. It's a boy. And she's like, you're kidding. I'm always joking with her. I'm like, I'm not kidding. It's a boy. Just kind of in that same tone,
right.
Right there.
Right.
And so every day they'd come to the room. All right, does baby Johnson have a name yet? And it's like, no, we really don't know what to call him. We weren't waiting on a boy. We were done with boys.
You were 2 for 2 going into this one.
We were 2 for 2. And they tell you got a 50-50 chance, but after you have that second one, that percentage drops really quickly. So we finally picked a name for him. Actually, the girl name we had picked out first was Cadence. And so we figured, all right, we just have 3 kids. We're never going to have a girl. Let's cut Cadence down to Caden. And, that's how we got his name. And then the 4th one was a total surprise, out of the blue. Both of us are crying, Lord, we can't do this. And we wanted to find out this time, what are we having? We go to the ultrasound place, find out that it's a girl, and it's pandemonium. So 3 boys and a girl. She's my delight.
And you're right in the thick of it based on those ages. Like they're coming into their own and they are active, pursuing their interests. There's 2 of you and 4 of them. So you're playing this sort of weird contain, defense, penalty, kill type of scenario, right?
Yeah. I still try to exert my strength and size over them, but there's
good luck with that.
Good luck, yeah. They haven't figured out how to team up against me yet. I'm just like, guys, once you figure that out, it's all you. It's your world.
I always said, you just have to stay one step ahead of them, especially when they're younger. When they get older, they can sniff you out a little bit. But when they're younger, if you can stay just one step ahead, they'll never know. They'll never know that you're just only one step.
That's it. Parenting is just about being one step ahead.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a truly great. It's a gift. It's a joy to parent. We love it. We love our kids and we like them. So
well, even better. I can relate.
Yeah.
So as you look across the landscape of where we are today and the time in which we're living, the time in which we're recording this, there's a lot of things that I would imagine you're thinking about as you're talking to your kids, as you're trying to do that intentional parenting. And there's a lot of terms that are being tossed at us front and center now, or become everyday language for those that are paying attention. Terms like racism or injustice or racial bias or inequality. Like this is where we're going to go today. But I wonder if you could spend some time just helping us to understand how you think about those terms, because maybe they're synonymous and maybe they're subtly different, maybe they're significantly different. But when you hear those terms, like what are the things that come to mind, or how are you helping your kids to understand those terms and what they mean?
Yeah. History and worldview are 2 lenses, I think, that come to mind, immediately. From a historical perspective, race is a social construct in that we're all a part of one race, right?
The human race.
The human race.
Yeah.
However, the construct of race as a category to define us differently from one another was created. And it was created not with the purest of intentions. It wasn't created to just define people in their appearance. It was actually created to define people with regards to levels of superiority and inferiority.
So class.
So but not just class. You can have even within one's what would be the most proper term is ethnicity.
Okay.
So you can have class within an ethnic group. But race actually defines the ethnic group from one another.
Got it.
So it's a class on a different scale. So historically speaking, we were identified with the place that we were from. So I would be Rich Johnson of Toledo, Ohio, right? That's where I'm from. I'd be identified with the land and the place. Well, once race became this thing that we could categorize ourselves and define ourselves differently from, it removed us from land and place. We're no longer defined by our land. You're defined now by your color and your facial, features, if you will. And it didn't stop there. It then went to the place of, well, what is valuable? What races then are more valuable than others? And again, from a historical perspective, this was created by white Europeans. And so in order to define ones categorically against one another, this is a white European construct. And so when we find that where we are right now, it has its roots from 1,500 years ago, as these things are being defined as we differentiate ourselves one from another, because it becomes the reason by which you could take land from someone. It becomes the reason by which you could enslave another person, because now we've defined our differences, and not just defined our differences, we've actually put a value on those differences. So one difference is more valuable than another, based on skin, based on gender, based on intellect, and cultural experience. So, for example, when I think historically about how First Natives were treated in North America, they were seen and viewed as savages, right?
Yep.
And so they weren't just people, they were savages. They didn't call Europeans savages. They called First Natives, indigenous people, savages. So they've already put a difference on there, and then they put a value on that difference as well, which then gave permission to say, well, these savages are not cultured like us, so it's our duty to go culturate them, if you will. It gives them a reason and a permission in order to do that. So, race is a social in its historical sense. There's one human race. But race as a social construct to define us is where we get the term racism, from. And racism is based off of that hierarchy or that level of difference that is, it is executed, if you will, with the sense of power to take what you feel like is yours, to have. So racism on its highest level is this power dynamic and prejudice that work together to keep people from moving up what they've already perceived as to be the ladder of superiority, and race. That the way it gets worked out even on, say, an everyday level, because most people listening will say, well, I don't have the power to exercise any kind of, prejudice. Is that it gets worked out in the ways of bias, and it gets worked out in the ways in which our institutions are constructed to affirm those biases. So there are four eyes of oppression, if you will. The first eye of oppression is ideology. It begins with an idea that one group is superior to another, and then it's reinforced by the second eye, which is institution. And so then that idea is institutionalized in everyday life. So education, religion, economics, land ownership, finances, even relationships, the institution of marriage, for example, who could marry whom and why not? Well, that began with an idea that then got institutionalized. And then after that institutional way of oppression, there is an interpersonal way of oppression. So that means how people relate to one another. They're just living out what is already being affirmed in the institution. And then the last I is an internalization of that belief. So it's not now just in the way in which we react to one another. Now I actually internalize it and believe it.
And does that internalization happen both ways?
It happens both ways.
The giver and the receiver, if you will.
Yeah. Where one believes they are superior and the other believes they are inferior.
Yeah.
Or one believes they are supposed to live life in this, particular way with these values, and another believes that those values are contradictory to the way they live, and therefore they have no option other than to just stay in the place that they're in.
Yeah.
So one of the things I share with my boys, in fact, is a picture from my fifth grade year. And I've got this party shirt on. It's bright orange, paisleys. I mean, it's wild. And a blue blazer, like a bright blue blazer that offsets this orange. It's hideous. It's horrible. But it was the style, in fifth grade.
At least somewhere.
Somewhere. And the somewhere I got it from was Miami Vice. So if you remember Miami Vice,
I do.
Don Johnson,
that's right.
Philip Michael Thomas.
Yep.
I love that show. I should have been watching in fifth grade, but it's a Friday night. After Night Rider was Miami Vice, and my parents let me stay up. So I wanted to be like Don Johnson. Don Johnson was the white character in Miami Vice. Sonny Crockett, was his character. He got the girls. He drove the Ferrari. He got the bad guys. Philip Michael Thomas, his kind of partner, assisted him. Didn't get the beautiful women like Don Johnson did. He drove a hoopty, not a Miami Ferrari, Daytona Ferrari, sweet car. And it's like, man, if I have the option of who I want to be, do I want to be Don Johnson, Sonny Crockett, or do I want to be Philip Michael Thomas, Tubbs? It's like, nah, man, I want to be DJ. He gets the girls. And it wasn't just I want to be like him. It was actually something I internalized in that white people make progress. I want to be white. That's the way you want to make it in this world. You want to make it up the proverbial ladder. You need to do as much as you can to shed your own culture so that you can be accepted by that culture that defines what's success and what is valuable. So for several years, I wanted to be white, even though I knew I couldn't change the color of my skin, but I could do everything I could in order to be accepted by, whites, whether it was in school or sports or what have you. I internalized a belief that being black wasn't enough to equal success in society.
So my mind is running in a bunch of different directions, but I feel like it's another example of ways that we look past who we are and want to be somebody that we're not because we see that as the ideal that we're to strive for, right? That Don Johnson's got the better life. And so in order to have that life, I need to look and be and act and talk like him.
Yeah. That was fifth grade all the way probably up to about ninth grade. So ninth grade, something significant happened in my life. I'm a freshman varsity wrestler. I'm the only black guy on the team. And there were jokes that were often made. I mean, it's wrestling. It had its own kind of crude culture. And so lots of jokes against black folks, right? And after every joke, oh, Rich, we're not talking about you. Yeah. We're not talking about you. You're not like them.
Interesting.
So there was some differentiation. In one sense, I had kind of made it. I made it into the community that I wanted to make it in. However, they've identified me differently than actually the way I kind of have this cultural relevance to. And so I asked the guys to actually stop. I got into a point where it just become enough. I didn't want to do it anymore. And they kept doing it. So the following year, 10th grade year, I didn't wrestle. And I told him
because of
that, I couldn't do it. I'm going to go play basketball like my dad. Now I'm 5'5", in the 10th grade. I'm actually still 5'5" right now.
Spud Webb made it.
Spud Webb
Just saying.
made it. Hey, my dad was 6'1", and my grandma always promised me that I'd get there.
You
and
had
I'm
hope.
Still waiting on grandma. I'm like, when I get to heaven, Lord, can you give me,
Maybe.
5 more inches or something, whatever.
Yeah.
But I quit wrestling. I go and play basketball. I'm a terrible basketball player. Wrestlers generally don't make good basketball players, in case anybody is wondering. But I rode the bench, and I only got put in when we're getting blown away by 40 points. And the wrestling team would come to every game and watch me and be like, dude, we could have won districts. What are you doing? We need you on the team. And at the end of the year, it was simple. It was like, I just need you guys to stop with the jokes. That's it. And they agreed. They actually agreed. You're right. You're more of a brother to us than, telling jokes and everything. And the last 2 years, 11th and 12th grade year was amazing. It was really great friendships, with these guys. We tore up the town with districts and regional champs and state champs and all that. It was awesome. But it was a turning point for me in that what was valuable is to say really how I felt as I was going internally through my own challenges, being what does it mean to be black, in America and in this multiracial school and on this wrestling team that was getting worked out at that time. And I can speak from my own experience that becoming a boy, becoming a man is not just in the sense of gender, what that means in our gender and masculinity. It also is related to what does it mean specifically to be a person of color and a man. It's something that we live with, we wake up with, we look in the mirror. It's reinforced in positive, affirming ways and reinforced in negative and unaffirming, ways in the media and conversations and relationships with one another. And it's just something that we track with in addition to what it is to simply be a man. And that's something that I think about with my boys is that I want them to understand how their father sees them as young men, and specifically as young African American men who are raised in a world that will not always affirm them for who they are.
So when you're telling your stories about being on the bench or being on the wrestling mat or having conversations like that with your teammates, I imagine that your boys are leaning in. Because it's like, not only is it dad, but dad's telling some of his stories, and dad's telling stories that are directly applicable to the things that they're experiencing today.
Sure.
It may be 20 to 30 years later, but we're still experiencing those things today.
Yeah.
Has that been your experience as you're talking to your boys?
Oh, yeah. They're having conversations. I mean, because of the situation that we're facing right now. Black Lives Matter is an often repeated, phrase, and the counter to that is generally all lives matter.
Yeah.
And so my boys are having conversations with their friends they play basketball with, play soccer with, go to school with. Hey, Dad, a friend of mine says all lives matter. How might I respond to that? And so we're having real-time conversations, as they're talking with friends. Or, hey, Dad, my white friend says that he now understands he has white privilege and he wants to do something with his white privilege. What do I text back, to him, in that regards? And so these are very real-time, conversations I'm having with my boys and how they're talking with their friends.
So you brought up Black Lives Matter. Mm-hmm. What does that phrase mean to you? What does Black Lives Matter mean to you?
The first so when I was young back in the day, I used to listen to vinyl. I mean, I loved vinyl more than listening to the radio or cassette tapes or CDs when those start to come out. And my folks had a great collection that they passed on to me. And one of those great collections was James Brown. And James Brown had a song back in the 60s, I'm Black and I'm Proud. Say it loud, I'm black and I'm proud. And that song was created in a time when black bodies were not seen as valuable. And so for black people to see themselves in the beauty of who they are, James Brown creates this song. People love to dance to it, but James Brown was giving a philosophy of life for affirming black bodies. Say it loud. Don't just say it quietly. Say it loud. I'm black and I'm proud. Yeah, that's right. That's who you are. It's good. It's beautiful. And so when I hear Black Lives Matter today, I hear James Brown singing I'm black and I'm proud. And it's to say a statement, first of all, of affirmation to the black community. Black Lives Matter. If no one else affirms it, you affirm it, you own it, you live it, you embrace it. You are valuable. Black Lives Matter.
So back to getting at this internalization that you were talking about before, right? Instead of taking on the the racism that has been projected. It's more of like, hey, I am valuable. I do matter.
Right.
My life, my body, my person, I do matter.
Right, right. So yeah, it's first a statement of internalization. My life matters, and then it's a statement to say to those who are around us, "Do you see us?" So colorblindness has become this ideology that says, "I don't judge you based on your color." People want to point to Martin Luther King's, statement in his March on Washington. "I dream of the day when my children, your children, won't be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character." To say, see, Martin Luther King was talking about color blindness. No, he wasn't talking about color blindness. He was talking about color consciousness. And that there is a consciousness that I have about your color that doesn't become something you are defined by. Your ability isn't defined by that. Your ability is not judged, by that one way or the other. I do see your color, but I don't judge you based on that.
Yeah.
And so the second part is to say, hey, man, I want you to see me. When you see Rich, I don't want you to just see Rich. I want you to see Rich as an African-American male and to see that. Not always track with it. I wonder what this black Rich is thinking about. Like not in that sense, but in the sense that I recognize, in the same way that I recognize that Rich is a man, I also recognize that he is an African-American with a unique experience. And so the second thing is that it's an affirmation to the self. It's also a declaration to others that my life matters. And then it is a political statement. It is a political statement because historically, black bodies have not mattered. I think we fail to recall in our history that black bodies were only valued at 3/5 of a person because they were viewed as not having a soul worth saving, redeeming, and their physical bodies were the only things that they were used to having. And so treating it like property, they're not even fully human. You're 3/5 of a human.
Yeah.
And that's on record, like in the Constitution, legally. That doesn't just shift with the change of a law. That's something that's been passed down historically for years. I remember going, and the way it gets transformed is how we're presented in the media, right? It gets translated into how we're projected to, the media. In fact, I remember going to Kenya on a mission trip, and folks it was already different and new that a black person was on this mission trip, right? That was already, because black people don't tend to go. And then what Africans are used to seeing in terms of missionaries, they're used to seeing white missionaries. They're not used to seeing people who look like them. So we go to this restaurant, and on the TV screen are some black people who are rapping. It's kind of American thing. I'm like, how are we in Kenya and I'm watching like Yo MTV raps or something, right? Like, how would it? And then they turn to me and like, can you rap? And it's like, actually, no, I'm not very good at that rapping thing. And so it's just the way in which we're projected in the media all across the world at what is valuable, that it does make a political statement as well, that black lives do matter.
So I have resonated with the voice that says all lives matter. Mm-hmm. And I have resonated with, or the voices that are suggesting that we not just see color as a divider. Mm-hmm. That has resonated with me as well. But what you're saying is the problem with that is that the skin color and the impact, that lived experience, I like how you say that lived experience gets overlooked. Mm-hmm. When we just say all lives matter, or when we want to look past the color of skin, in effect, what we're doing is we're under acknowledging the experience of what it's like to walk around in dark skin. Mm-hmm. And it's quite different than walking around in light skin.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It also, it just doesn't acknowledge the history. If we say all lives matter, then where is it reflected in our history? but not just in our history, because folks were like, well, we don't have slavery anymore, so that ended. Well, slavery turned into terror lynching. Terror lynching turned into mass incarceration, which also, around the same time, you're impacted by inequalities in education and service lending. And so slavery didn't end. Racism didn't stop with slavery. It just kept evolving. It kept evolving.
It took a different form.
It took a different form, right? And so when we say, well, all lives matter, and it's like, well, let's look at today and say, well, prove that all lives matter, particularly in those various industries of education and lending and political office and entertainment and business ownership and wealth and so forth and so on. It's like, if it really mattered, we would see it matter in the ledger. Let's look at the ledger and see where it actually matters. And I don't see the equivalence there. I don't see the equity that reflects all lives matter. What I see actually is quite disparaging in the differences between various people groups of color, with Black and African American people being at the bottom.
So while we may want to believe all lives matter, the evidence proves that they don't really all matter, because we've not addressed the history and the way people of color have been treated.
Right. Yeah. I think, George Floyd's killing is what got us into this national conversation, but it was connected to Breonna Taylor. It was connected to Ahmaud Arbery. All of that was happening at the same time. And on the same day as George Floyd's death, Amy Cooper in New York City calls 911 on an African-American man who's bird watching and asks her to simply put her dog on a leash.
Yeah.
And it's actually Amy Cooper I'm more concerned about than the officer who killed George Floyd, because there was a phone call that was made against George Floyd to weaponize the police and police department against George Floyd for something that really is not 911 offensible. That the police are being used against the Black community for things that are not criminal, which suggests, again, the way in which Black bodies are seen. They are seen as criminal. Amy Cooper sees this Black man as a criminal who the police need to come deal with. I don't even know the person who made the phone call against George Floyd, but hey, this guy gave me a counterfeit, $20 bill. That's not a 911 phone call. That's a call to your insurance company. That's not like, hey, we need to get this guy arrested here and go to jail because he tried to give me a $20 fake bill, which ended up not being fake at all. But then the way George Floyd gets criminalized in the media, pulling up his past, pulling up things he's done, which are not connected to why he was being detained, and is certainly not connected to why he was killed, suggests that the way we look at Black bodies is to criminalize them. Dylan Roof, who kills 9 African-American innocent people in a church that has historical roots in the African Methodist Episcopal denomination, African-American community. Dylan Roof gets taken to Burger King to go get a sandwich before he goes to be jailed. And so he number one walks away with his life, but it's not just his life. Hey man, you hungry? You need anything? You want something to drink? We'll take you to go get something on the way to taking you down, to the precinct. It's like, man, one guy gets to live after committing a real crime, and another man does not get to live after committing what is not a crime, other than the fact that he was Black.
Well, guys, at the outset, I mentioned that Rich is candid and eloquent, funny and inspiring, and I hope that is what you've experienced so far, even as we tackle this large and multifaceted topic of race and racism. In the second half of this conversation, we get further into the process he's leading his boys through on their journey to manhood. We cover some historical ground on race and culture in this country, and then Rich offers some practical steps on how you can grow in this area. All that and more coming next week. In the meantime, I've added a resource document from Rich to this episode for you to begin or continue with your own exploration. Okay, that's all for this week. Keep going and growing and help your boy become the man he was created to be. Until next time, adios. Hey listeners, thanks for journeying with us on this Next Man Up podcast. We would love to hear from you. Maybe you have a question or an idea, perhaps a topic for us to consider. If that's you and you want to reach out to us, you can get us at feedback@thenextmanup.com. That's feedback@thenextmanup.com. Again, we'd love to hear from you. Until next time, we'll see you later.